Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Speaking of Trauma. My name is Heather, and I'm joined here by my wonderful co-host, Chad. Chad, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Chad Rickner. Um, I'm a I'm a former teacher turned coffee roaster business owner. I taught for about 25 years, and that actually plays into what we're talking about because I did make a career change, and some of it was related to what we're talking about. So um, I'm married and live in Washington State on the beautiful island of Whidbey Island. Um, I'm 53 and I have lived my entire life with trauma, unbeknownst to me. But as I learned and researched and therapy and talking to other people, I have begun to learn a lot more about trauma and how that has affected my life in general.
Mm.
I suffered from childhood physical abuse, sexual abuse, abandonment, other fun stuff like that. I was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, so I was undiagnosed as a child, um, and was always just kind of depressed throughout my life. So all of these things, I'm introducing myself that way because of the topic we're going to be discussing. It's very relevant, how things play out in our lives. So and I was very fortunate to find through YouTube my friend Heather, and maybe you could tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. That was great. So, yeah, I'm Heather, and I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, as well as intimate partner violence and sexual assault. And my mental health has been something I've always struggled with, even since childhood. First, starting out with anxiety and depression, also undiagnosed ADHD. Didn't get that until adulthood. But I also was struggling with the subject of today's video, which we will get to in a minute. But for the most part, it really didn't interfere with my life in any substantial or noticeable way to other people. That is until 2017, when I was sexually assaulted, and I've been disabled ever since then. And long story short, that assault was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back as far as my mental health is concerned. And it was like it just opened the floodgates that had been holding back all sorts of traumas that I'd experienced throughout my life, but wasn't really ever consciously thinking about. And soon after that is when I learned that I'd unknowingly been living with a dissociative disorder since childhood, which I developed to survive the sort of environment that I grew up in. But what was even more shocking to me than that diagnosis was learning that my life had been following a very predictable path based on my childhood. And since then, I've endeavored to raise awareness about the devastating lifelong impacts of untreated childhood trauma, as well as destigmatize topics like childhood sexual abuse and mental illness. And which is why I couldn't be more thrilled to be starting this project with you, Chad, because I know it'll be helpful to a lot of people. And I also just love talking to you about these things.
It's important. It's important
Yeah.
to talk. Okay, so on to the topic. So this is our first video of this project, and so when we were talking about possible topics, the list was quite long. There's plenty of stuff to talk about, and people don't talk about this stuff unless they're some sort of a trained professional, um, therapy, that sort of thing. But we're trying to make this a more common, acceptable, um, destigmatized topic. Nothing taboo here. Um, I will say we aren't trained professionals. We're not therapists. We're not doctors or anything like that. I've had enough therapy where I could probably be better than a lot of therapists, but I do not have that um, title under my belt. Um, so today we're going to be talking about complex PTSD. A lot of people have heard of PTSD, but many people have not heard of this complex form of PTSD. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, how it's different from the two are different, PTSD and complex PTSD, the common symptoms that crop up with complex PTSD, and what those symptoms look like in my life and Heather's life. And all of what we're talking about is personal experience. Um, we do our research, we read and that sort of thing, but we're just speaking from personal experience. So please keep in mind that the topic can look, the symptoms of this topic can look quite different in different people's lives. So Heather and I are just two examples of how this plays out. Um, and then lastly, we want to just start with the definitions. Okay, so um, post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, um, typically develops from a single traumatic event or multiple traumatic experiences that occur in a short period of time. A lot of times people will hear this term used and immediately think of military or war, things like that, which it oftentimes is associated with that, but it doesn't have to be. PTSD is just a response to something that happens, and there are certain symptoms that come with that. Um, the other complex PTSD, there's going to be similar symptoms that come up that are in both categories, both definitions. But complex PTSD or CPTSD is a result of long-term repeated interpersonal trauma. Oftentimes, but not always, this trauma began in early childhood. Um, so this takes place over a long period of time. It's not a single event or maybe a couple episodes of abuse within a month or something. It's a sustained abuse, and that's the most significant difference between trauma from PTSD and complex PTSD. Okay, Heather, do you want to take over here and start looking at the symptoms?
Yeah, sure. Here, I know, let's see. Well, I wanted to add this little tidbit just to help sort of maybe make it make sense to people is that according to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, up to 78% of children reported to child welfare agencies have experienced complex trauma. So like this is very, very pervasive, very unfortunately prevalent amongst the most vulnerable of us out there. But so, as far as symptomology, both PTSD and complex PTSD symptoms are grouped into clusters. And CPTSD includes all of the symptoms of PTSD as well as some additional ones. So I think we'll go through those and then just kind of share some of those experiences for us. So the first one is re-experiencing the trauma. This can be through nightmares, intrusive memories, or flashbacks. And then what do we got? Avoidance, persistent sense of threat, and negative alterations in cognition. So those are the clusters for PTSD, which complex PTSD has all of those, as well as additional ones like affect dysregulation, negative self-concept, and disturbances in relationships.
Okay, so we'll go back through and just kind of touch on each of those and how. Remember that we are just two individuals that have experienced.
Yeah, not therapists.
Right, and so we're just sharing those. This information comes from trusted sources. So it's not, we're not making that stuff up. But then we're going to add to those with our personal experience. So, for example, number one, re-experiencing the trauma. How does that look in your everyday life, Heather?
Well, I very often have nightmares, like very often, and as well as intrusive memories. So just involuntarily recalling a traumatic experience, and my body will respond like it's happening now, even though it isn't. And something that's particularly difficult with complex trauma is that we don't necessarily know what that trigger is because we have so many little things that could trigger that. And then I also experience flashbacks quite a bit. And a good example, I think, of that is whenever I would see an El Camino, I would get just filled with disgust and fear and just a very, very unnatural sort of response to a particular kind of vehicle, which I later discovered was the type of car that the man who was sexually abusing me drove growing up. So even though I didn't remember that exactly, there was a part of my brain that did. And every time even to this day, and whenever I see El Caminos or they get brought up, I just feel this, like this, I hate them. I absolutely hate them.
Yeah, that's crazy that and not knowing it for a while until you started learning. That's one of the reasons why it's so important to talk about this stuff and learn about this stuff is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Um, Along those lines, I as a child I had nightmares all the time, and they followed a theme, oftentimes suffocation or being trapped, couldn't move, that sort of thing. Um, Flashbacks, well, intrusive memories. Um, there's not really much in the way of. I have a horrible memory. A lot of my childhood I don't remember. Um, so that one I'm not real clear on how that plays out in my life. But flashbacks, um, those I learned a lot about flashbacks because I always like in the movies how they portray a flashback with someone in particular, like war, having
Yeah.
memories of war and that sort of stuff. I never really experienced that. Um, but I would have what I later found out were emotional flashbacks. So just an overall feeling something, for example, angry men in authority. Um,
Oh, yeah.
I had a lot of so the two abusers in my childhood were both men of status and um, authority, and I always struggle when I meet someone new, a man, like especially if it's a boss or something. I'm always very wary. Um, that's kind of it's a little bit vague. It's hard to explain, but these feelings come up, and that's what it's talking about with that. Flashbacks. So in our notes, it flashbacks can feel like, for example, sudden onset of intense emotions. That happens. I do have that happen. Physical
Me too.
reactions. Um, so your body is assuming that you're in a threatening event or a situation. Um, Heart rate speeds up, breathing increase. Like it's stress, and you're trying to figure out whether you need to leave or like freeze or fight or all those things. But a lot of times it was, um, for example, muscle tension. That's one thing I've struggled with my entire life.
Me too.
And I learned that it was called body armoring. So
Oh,
especially in physical abuse, as a kid, you learn to be tense, especially if you don't know when the shit's going to hit the fan, so to speak. But my body is naturally tense. I have regular massage these days to help with that, but I hold a lot of tension in my body. Um,
Me too.
The the next one that I really want you to touch on this is dissociation. This is
Hmm.
um, part of re-experiencing the trauma. Can you? I I've got some mild dissociation throughout my history, but yours I think would be a little more significant to talk about.
Yeah. So yeah, because I have a dissociative disorder, that is my brain's way of responding to trauma. So rather than let's say I'm triggered by something, rather than necessarily having to stay feeling all of that, which I oftentimes do, my brain has this other option of just disconnecting me completely from all of my feelings, emotions, thoughts, like, or in very extreme cases where I just leave altogether and I don't, well, I guess maybe that doesn't really happen as far as the triggers, but during the traumatic situations, I've experienced just complete dissociation. I'm not there. I appear sometime afterward. But for people who don't have dissociative disorders, they can still experience dissociation. And what's most commonly experienced are things like dissociative amnesia, where you just can't recall certain parts of the traumatic experience. Or there's also depersonalization, so like feeling like you're not real, or derealization, like feeling like the world is unreal, or like there's like a barrier between you and the world, or it's just kind of fuzzy and unreal. And people experience it in a lot of different ways, but those are some of the more common ways that people experience dissociation with complex PTSD, even without a dissociative disorder.
Yeah, that's one of the things about all this is it can be confusing because you can talk about a dissociative disorder, and I don't really relate to that. Um, but there are a lot of times that I can think back to um, just going numb.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I can still to this day, sometimes I make a conscious choice to just go numb, to detach myself from feeling any feelings that are potentially overwhelming. I try not to do that. It's not something that I want to be able to feel all of that, but sometimes it's just too much, and I just have to kind of go numb. But one thing that I also do is I've got my entire life I've had a history of substance abuse. Been
Mm.
in treatment multiple times. That was I would use substances in order to numb myself or disassociate. So it's kind of like a little helping hand to get to that. Whereas sometimes it just happens without anything, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Let's see here. Let's move on down the. So in along the flashbacks part, um, we we want to talk a little bit about triggers because I think um, that's a commonly overused phrase or term these
Yes.
days. Oh, I'm so triggered. Oh my God. Well, a trigger is simply some sort of a stimulus that sets in motion an emotional response when we're talking about. So, for example, Heather, you talked about the El Camino.
Mm-hmm.
That was a trigger. You didn't you know that now, but you didn't know it before. But there was
Yeah.
you could see an El Camino, and shit would just start happening. Right.
Yep.
That's a
Yep.
good example of a clear trigger. Um, Mine, I mentioned angry men, like men in authority, like being dominant and that sort of stuff is very much a trigger for me. Um, but there's uh, sensory triggers, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. Those can all be part of it. And then emotional triggers, stress. Um, Let me see here. Conflict, that, like I was just talking about, emotional overwhelm,
Mm-hmm.
anniversaries, similar situations, media, the things that you see that remind you. So there's a lot of different triggers, but the important thing to remember is that is something that just sets in motion that response, that your nervous system kicks in whenever a trigger happens, and it's different for everyone, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I experienced one with seasons. So I already have like seasonal affective disorder or like winter depression.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, a lot of pretty bad things have happened to me around that same period of time. So I can actually spend months at a time just kind of chronically being triggered by just the time of year or the time of day. Like when a certain person would come home from work, like sometimes that will sort of set me off.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it shows up in all kinds of weird ways.
Yeah, I think I mentioned to you before the sound of a belt being pulled from a pair of pants.
Yeah.
That's that's a real clear trigger for me because that was always followed with um, a beat down. There was one other here that, um, well, in the physical reactions, how we talked about that emotional response starts happening. Your body's nervous system is kicking into overdrive. Um, Another one that they listed was negative self perception. So sudden intense feelings of worthlessness, unworthiness, or self blame.
Hmm.
Um, that definitely is something that I've struggled with my entire life. Is just having an overall general negative self perception, just not good enough. Um, I never I never could have vocalized that, but through the abuse and stuff, it literally kind of beats it out of you, that self-confidence that like you're being abused by another human in ways that just shouldn't happen. And so it's natural that a person would be confused, a child, like
Hmm.
an adult at least has some sense of what's okay and not okay, and like you can kind of see the lines that shouldn't be crossed. As a child, you're developing your whole world view in the throes of trauma.
Yeah.
So I didn't grow up feeling confident about anything, no matter how good I was at something or talented or smart or anything. That negative self-perception was instilled at a very early age, so it's still something that I struggle with.
Yeah, so do I. And again, it's because a lot of times, again, not all the time, but most often this is occurring in childhood and within the context of a relationship that you should feel safe in and that you look to sort of mirror your worth. And it's like you were saying, like adults have the sort of like context to understand a situation better. But if it's a child and your parent is harming you or your teacher is harming you, you feel like it's me. It's because of me. I must be bad. Otherwise they wouldn't be doing this to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, that just gets so deeply ingrained in your psyche and in your body that you might live with it the rest of your life.
Absolutely. And again, this is why we want to speak of trauma. We want to talk about it so that people can at least maybe make a connection between something that's going on in their life and the possibility that it's rooted in trauma.
Yeah.
Um, Not everybody has trauma, but
A
I think
lot of
people
us
would be
do.
very shocked to know how many people um, actually are living with trauma, whether they know it or not.
Hmm.
Um, let, so let's move on to number two is avoidance. Any action designed to prevent the occurrence of an uncomfortable emotion such as fear, sadness, or shame. Um, so avoiding, simply trying to keep yourself from being in any situation that might trigger you, or what does that look like for you?
I have a really, well, for me, it does involve avoiding places that remind me of certain events or just like even certain times of my life, even if it doesn't directly relate to a specific event, just, like the houses that I lived in as a kid or the town that I lived in. Like there's just so many things there that just remind me of what happened when I was there. And then there are other people too. who maybe have not necessarily similar histories, but that who I've felt have been a little dismissive of the significance of, for instance, childhood sexual abuse, then I avoid them, because then that's just what I think about, and then I think about what happened to me, and it's pretty unfortunate.
Yeah, avoidance makes perfect sense in terms of we don't. I don't think any human wants to gravitate toward negative feelings or
No.
things that things that cause stress. Like that's not how we're built. Um, but for me, avoidance was um, totally wrapped up in substance abuse. So I started drinking. I had my first drink at 13,
Oh wow.
smoking weed at 13. And it didn't pick up right away, but very soon into high school, I found that that was incredibly um, uplifting to have a substance in my body that makes me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that discovery, unconscious as it was significant in that I found a tool that I could use in order to make myself feel better.
Yeah.
I just did a. Heather and I both have different YouTube channels, by the way. We didn't mention, but I just uploaded a video yesterday where I was talking about my addiction and how I view it very much like a tool these days. Um, Now, the tool becomes a source of other issues and problems eventually. I'm not saying that it's a great solution, but it
Mm-hmm.
is a solution and it works for a lot of people in the short term. I just kept it going for a lot of years. I drank for 30 something years, and it began to cause other problems. So that just made things worse. But substance abuse is one of the biggest things that you see in people with a history of trauma. Is very, very common.
Very
Most
common.
addicts, anyone addicted to something, probably has some type of trauma in their past.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say probably because I can't say with 100% certainty, but uh, more times than not, addicts are just trying to cope with trauma in their life. And then we talked a little bit about dissociation a minute ago.
Yeah.
One that's really prominent in my life is the third one: persistent sense of threat. What about you?
Oh yeah.
That ring a
Yep.
bell?
Oh yeah. So yeah, that typically looks like hypervigilance and then just difficulty relaxing or feeling safe. And yeah, for me, I'm very easily irritable, especially if I'm in a situation where there's just a lot going on, a lot of stimuli, like just even being out in crowds or public places where there's just a ton of stuff going on, like that will really just heighten sort of all of my reactions and also my stress response. And then yeah, in just every situation that I'm in, which I don't even notice it so much anymore, but in every situation or like every place that I'm in, I will figure out like, okay, in the event of this emergency, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? What am I going to grab? Like things that people don't typically think about, but I think about that stuff all the time.
When so you haven't always been aware of that. You still aren't. You just kind of do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start to think, "Oh, I'm pretty sure this is wrapped up in my trauma"? Was there a moment, or did you just kind of start to learn and figure it out?
I think it was just when I started to actually learn about complex PTSD or even just PTSD in general. That's the craziest thing, is that I didn't even know that I had PTSD, even though I had looked into it before. But again, like we typically see it just in the context of soldiers, which,
Mm.
very, very prevalent there. But yeah, once I started to see like, okay, what else does hypervigilance look like? Like it can just look like always trying to prepare for disaster, or think that everything is unsafe or there's disaster around every corner and you've just always got to be prepared. And it's unfortunate because it takes away from your ability to be in the present as well and to be able to fully consciously figure out like, okay, no, I'm not in danger, because your body's just, or your brain more is acting like, nope, nope, we've got to be ready. Like you never know when the danger's coming.
Yeah, it's a nervous system disorder, if anything.
Yeah.
It's not because our nervous system grows and matures and develops according to the stimuli that it's presented with. Um, and this was one that I never really thought much about it. I've always thought I was a little bit high strung, but I would have even up until, I don't know, a few 4 5 years ago maybe, I wouldn't have even told you that I had anxiety.
Oh, wow.
I I knew I had depression. That's the way it manifests most often, but then I started to see that those are two sides of the same coin. And when I started to look at that, like you're saying, I didn't realize, oh, wow, I do that. And in particular, like for example, an easy one is going to a restaurant and not sitting with my back to the door. That's
Mm-hmm.
I usually share that one because I think a lot of people that it's very tangible. You can, yeah, my back's to the door and I can't see who's behind me, and so therefore I should be worried. That's not normal. Um, the constantly assuming the worst or planning for the worst and hoping for the best is not a healthy way to view the world. And that's, I just have always done that because if you're thinking about the worst thing that could happen, if it does happen, you're ready. Like
Yeah.
that makes sense to me. But how many times has it actually manifested in some sort of violent way or threatening way, or it hasn't? I
Yeah.
mean, the last time I remember being jumped, like physically jumped, I was still in high school, and it was a kind of a brawl. I That's the only time I can go back and think, wow, yeah, if I would have been looking a little more like if I would have been using hypervigilance, maybe I wouldn't have gotten clocked like that. But because it never happens, I even watch movies, and Megan, my wife, will like say something when I make a comment and go, you realize that's not a healthy way to, I mean, we do that with each other. She's not like putting me down or anything. She's like,
Right.
you realize that's like really not a good way. Or she'll just giggle and say, I've never thought like that. So it's only pretty recently that I've been um, aware of how many things fall into the category of hypervigilance.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting.
It
It is
is
fucking
so
exhausting
exhausting.
because you're constantly thinking about this and that. It's why I got to the point where I just didn't really want to leave home,
Yeah.
right? Like if you
Mm-hmm.
don't go out into public, nothing can go wrong.
Right.
But now I'm isolating, and
That's
I
avoidance.
don't. Right, I'm avoiding. Uh, I try to work through that and not isolate, but it got to a really bad point last year in October. I ended up going to treatment for PTSD and trauma, and because it had gotten so bad, and I didn't want to leave the house, and when I did, I was completely stressed and freaked out, and so that persistent sense of threat has always been very prominent in my life. And I think a lot of it has to do with people in authority were the ones that were abusing me. So if you can't trust the authority that's supposed to protect you or guide you or lead you or nurture you, then who do you who do you trust? Like,
Yeah.
so
You got to
all of
learn to
these,
survive.
right? Yeah, and that makes sense if you're continuing in, abusive situations, or your life is full of threats. It's just that mine is not. I live a very charmed life, if you will, in terms of, like, I live in a super safe place. We don't even have animals on the island that are a threat. I mean, yeah, there's some people that might be a little bit of a threat, but it's not a way that I want to live my life anymore. Um, anyway, that's anything else on that one?
Well, see, I mean, you brought up so many great points and you just explained it so well. But I think the only thing that I would add is that because this is such a natural state of being for people who are suffering from trauma, you're not even necessarily consciously aware that you're being hypervigilant. And in your talking now, I was just reminded of just the other day, I was making dinner. Scott, my partner, he was home. I knew he was home. I knew he was in the garage. And I was just going about thinking that I was totally fine, but he came up behind me and I didn't realize that he had. And he just like put his hand on my shoulder to be like, oh, hey, I lost it. Not like on him. I didn't like freak out, but it was
Right.
that exaggerated startle response. I'm like, oh my God. And like my heart was pounding. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't mean to, like, why did you do that? Like, God. And of course, he's like, he just came up behind me and touched me. But like, it
Yeah.
messed me up for probably a good 30 minutes. Like, it took a long time for my body to be able to like calm back down. And yeah, I thought I was fine. I didn't even think that I was in a heightened state of arousal or being hypervigilant, but that's just my natural state of being.
Yeah, the startle response in particular. And I would like to add that, and we'll talk a little bit about relationships in a minute, but Heather and I are both incredibly fortunate to have partners in our lives that are aware and open to learning about trauma and how it affects us, their partners. Um, that's huge. That is so huge
Yeah.
to actually have someone that you can trust, because Scott he wasn't trying to give you a woo,
Nope,
or
not at all.
anything. But he also knows that you have what you have. You're living with trauma, and he didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. But do you see how that could just become a shit show in like a second, right?
Yeah.
People that just don't get it. Um,
Yeah, we're very lucky to have the partners
yeah,
that we have. I wasn't always so lucky.
right. Yeah, it. Um, we're in a good place now. Negative alterations in cognition,
Hmm.
persistent negative beliefs about oneself, others, or the world. Just tick a yes next to all of them, I think.
Yeah.
So, for example, the idea that I am bad, no one can be trusted, the world is completely dangerous, I'm fundamentally broken, no one will ever love me, etc. Have you ever had any of those thoughts?
Oh, just all the time, all of them.
A little bit.
Yeah.
How does that look? Like this one, people don't like. How do they know?
How do they know?
Like looking outside in, I'm not going to just assume that you think you're a piece of shit or fundamentally broken or what. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
No,
a
I
hidden.
do. It's again, it's one of those things I'm not even necessarily aware of. Like I don't go about the world feeling that way all the time. But like for instance, when I meet new people, I have the thought of like, oh, you have no idea what like the truth about me. And if you did, then I mean, you would never want to have any sort of relationship with me because I'm just broken. I'm actually this terrible person, or, things that aren't true. But what happened to me has shaped my sort of perception of myself and other people and the world.
Absolutely. It. and it's unbeknownst. Again, back to childhood development, you don't know you're developing in an unhealthy way
Yeah.
neurologically, right? We don't have that understanding. But when people have abused someone, in our case, like when we were abused, we have to fill in the blanks. Like, what is it that now when I was physically abused, it was usually because I got in trouble, did something wrong, whatever it was. That it's like I kind of connected it with that act of whatever it was. I did something wrong, and therefore I was punished, like abusively, but punished. Um, but when that severity is regularly applied to discipline,
Yeah.
it's you have to assume as a kid that yeah, you are bad. It's not that I did something bad. I'm bad because
Hmm.
this happens all the time. Um, no one can be trusted. Like the abuse, like turns trust on its head, and in order to avoid such a severe negative situation, again, you're going to do everything you can to protect yourself, and that one of those things is just assume that they're going to hurt you, right?
Yeah.
um, and the world's dangerous, broken. That I 100% believed that for my life. I don't anymore. Yeah, I've been hurt, and maybe I've been broken, but am healing. Um, and I would go into relationships like you would say, like, okay, I can keep, the deeper, darker stuff to myself, and that won't matter. Problem is, any relationship, think your personality, you bring that to the table, and those things shaped my personality. So just the way that you respond in arguments, or something goes wrong, and the way you take it, like it comes out, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely grew up with that. I'm not worthy. I'm just not good enough. That was the theme of my life, just not good enough. But holding myself to a perfect standard also doesn't help.
No, definitely did that too. I still do that. I'm still a perfectionist. But again, all of these things are things that your brain is doing to be like, how can I keep myself safe? Well, maybe I can keep myself safe if I do everything perfect, or keep myself safe if I just assume no one can be trusted, or keep myself safe from rejection and abandonment if I just don't fully share myself with someone.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like, I don't know if this was the case for you, but I know for me, I also had a very volatile and emotionally inconsistent parent. And so it was actually safer for me, or like the way that I navigated that was just to assume that, oh, yeah, my mother's moods are because of me. It's because of me. I'm bad. It's my fault. I need to do something about it. And again, it was just, it's not that she was telling me I was bad. It was just, in my child and developing brain, I thought, oh, she's acting this way because I didn't do anything wrong, so I just must be bad.
Yeah. And so that's why I'm in trouble, is just because I'm not
Yeah.
good enough, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, let's see, diminished ability to experience positive emotions. Um,
Which
and
that overlaps with depression so much.
mm-hmm, and persistent negative emotional state. So those two, um, another word that I describe my childhood as is just unhappy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have even said I had a horrible childhood. I don't think it was horrible. It can always be worse. There's always something worse, but just not happy.
Yeah.
I remember being lonely a lot. Um, and I grew up traveling and living abroad, and never really stayed anywhere longer than I think 2 years. Um, was the longest. So I also lacked the ability to know how to make intimate friendships, or like deep
Yeah.
friendships. That was another.
Me too.
Um, yeah. And that just feeds into not being good enough or not being lovable. Like, no one had time to get to know me. Like, we were there and then gone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, well, yeah, that all we've kind of all talked about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else to add in that negative alterations in cognition?
Well, so like one thing I thought of that maybe some people could relate to is, like you were talking about not really just being happy as a kid and feeling lonely. And I felt the same way. And I think that's also kind of where a lot of these negative alterations started to develop, was because I was so unhappy. Like I was having my first suicidal thoughts when I was like 11. And I was also experiencing anxiety. And the only thing that, you know, people would tell me was, there's nothing wrong. It's all in your head. Like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I just feel like this all the time. I don't know. And then again, yeah, it's very isolating. So you just start to, I don't know, almost separate yourself from everybody else because you feel like there's something clearly so wrong with me for me to be feeling this way. And the
Right.
truth is, there was. It's not that there was something wrong with me. It's that I was dealing with trauma, but I just didn't have the kind of support that I needed.
Yeah, things were happening to you. Um, and yeah, as we learn or develop our sense of identity, we look at it negatively. I always had a negative view of myself. And so why would you want to put that forward, push that
Right.
forward to other people when you yourself believe that you're not good enough or worthy or lovable? Or so it perpetuates that lack of connection, I think. And one of the remedies for all of this is connection.
Mm-hmm.
But we default to isolation. And if people knew who I really was, they wouldn't really like me. They wouldn't think, it doesn't have to be horrible, dark thoughts. It's just they just won't like me. And so I'll just like keep myself to the side.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that's so troubling about it, and especially if you're a kid trying to deal with this, is that on the one hand, you might be feeling like, I'm bad, I'm broken, the world can't be trusted. But at the same time, you are wanting connection. You're wanting, to hide who you really are from people because you're wanting connection. So it's just being in these two different states all the time that, yeah, it's just really sad. I
Mm-hmm.
feel bad for everybody who's gone through that.
Yeah. And how many kids go through that daily?
Yeah. But you are right. Connection is key. Connection
Mm-hmm.
is key to healing.
Yes. Let's move on to number 5, affect dysregulation. So, trouble managing emotions, sudden emotional outbursts or shutdowns, heightened emotional responses, chronic sadness, suicidal thoughts. Any
Hmm.
of them ring a bell?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe all of
Mm,
them.
yeah.
Yeah. I know. I think we've shared a lot of experiences that even kind of touch into this, but I don't know if this is something that you have. But so, like for instance, if I even think someone is mad at me or upset at me, it just immediately triggers me into, I'm the worst piece of shit. I'm horrible. Why am I even here? Like maybe why should I even keep living? Like not all the time, but it can be that significant of like going from fine to starting to like question if I should even be here.
Yes, that does happen with me. I I can't tell you how many times I've been ready to just shut down my business. Like, oh,
Really?
well, then why am I even doing this? I mean, it's a fleeting thought, and I've gotten much better at recognizing things like that, but it goes back to that your nervous system is just it's been grown in that way. And so I have to go, wait a minute. this this all ties in with trouble managing emotions and
Yeah.
that negative self concept. All this we can't talk about these. We can talk about these little things individually, but they all make up this complex PTSD.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things with me is catastrophic thinking.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
it it's amazing how quickly I take things to the edge, um, and then later realize, oh my gosh, it really wasn't that big a deal. And I still have memories of Megan, um, not that long ago, saying, "Hey, baby, do you think that maybe this emotional response is a bit inappropriate or over the top for what we're talking about?" Well, I
Yeah.
yeah, probably.
Probably. I love you, but probably.
Right. So the heightened emotional response, that catastrophic thinking, the end of the world scenario, and it could be about dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Like it can be that bad. Luckily, that doesn't happen that often. But if you think somebody's upset with you because you said something and you assumed that they thought, that can be an entire like interstate freeway in your mind, just
Oh, yeah.
right.
Yep.
And
And
it's
yeah,
not normal.
no. Well, it's normal for what we grew up with, but it's not healthy and it's generally not even based in reality or the reality of the situation.
Healthy, that's
It's
a better
it
word.
just completely colors our whole worldview, and it feels right. In the moment, it feels like we're absolutely right, which is why our brains are firing off the way that they are. But
Mm.
yeah, and then I feel like this is really a big reason why so many people with trauma turn to substances because we can't regulate very well or self-soothe. And then, we try something one time, maybe just as fun, like drinking, and find out, whoa, I can just be so much more normal, or like I have so much better control of my emotional state and my thoughts. And
Mhm.
it's a very very slippery slope once someone with
Yeah,
trauma discovers things like that.
because it works.
Yeah,
And I say that cautiously because
I know.
it does. Like it affects your brain in a positive way in those situations. The problem is anytime you use a tool too much, you can wear it out. Like it's
Hmm.
going to eventually it's going to cause more problems. But the emotional, that's one of the things that before I went to treatment last October, um, things were triggering me in a way that my emotions would just take over and run amok.
Hmm.
So, what I worked on then was just recognizing when that tipping point would take place and then try to back up a step so I could see the signs of dysregulation, um, or I could feel the signs of dysregulation in order to keep it from moving into complete, utter emotional dysregulation, because that's when I would end up on the floor, just
Yep.
crying in a heap and exhausted. And it's that, and me being an addict for years and years and years, I worked really hard at keeping my emotions suppressed,
Hmm.
because when I would have outbursts or emotional states, they would be so messy or so disturbing to me. I'm like, oh no, fuck that. I'm not feeling
Yeah.
that. So I've had very little practice with emotional regulation. Even as a 53-year-old dude, I'm not emotionally healthy yet, but I'm seeing what that is supposed to look like or can look like, and getting better at recognizing when my emotions are lying to me. Like, because
Hmm.
you made an excellent point. In the moment, you believe that what you're saying and doing is where you need to be, what you need to do.
Oh, yeah.
And I've read and learned that's usually when you need to stop. When you know you're right, and you need to say something, you need to defend, you need to put forward more information. To me, that's, I need to go, oh, if I think I'm that right, I'm probably not, I'm probably off the rails here. So it's just recognizing, like, so that has been a very big one for me. But luckily, fortunately, I guess, I'm getting much better at that regulation and practices that we do when we're not in those states that help us when we
Right.
get to that. You know, breathing exercises and exercise in general, meditation and journaling and all these different things. So,
Yeah. Well, catching yourself in the moment is impressive, but
mm,
it is a really good first step. Or even if you're able to reflect on a situation and realize, like, okay, wait a second, that I was definitely triggered by something. What could that have been? What could I do differently if that's even possible? But it's so difficult because if you think about it, you have two brains. You've got your survival brain and your thinking brain. You know, your survival is your fight or flight response. Like if when someone jumps out and startles you, you know, like that immediate freeze and like that's your survival brain kicking in. But then it quickly assesses, like, okay, we're not actually in danger. Like, chill out. And your thinking brain is allowed to come back online. But
mm,
yeah, it's when that survival brain gets triggered, your thinking brain just completely goes offline. Because, you know, if you're in the woods and come across a bear, it's not going to be advantageous to your survival to think, well, I don't know, should I fight this bear? Should I run from this bear? Like, what? It's like, no, just act. You just act and you get flooded with emotions, no conscious thought. You know, you're just acting on basically pure instinct and survival. And that's
mm,
what happens whenever you're triggered is that same process happens. Your survival brain just blows up, your thinking brain shuts down. So whatever your survival brain is telling you is real or is happening, that's real, even if
right.
it's not.
Yeah. And that it's amazing when you think back to situations where that's happened. I can think of like disagreements, arguments, and Megan saying, well, then why did you say whatever it was? Da da da. Well, no, I didn't say that. I was no, you literally spoke the words da 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 da. Um, I don't remember saying that, and
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say that. Like there, what comes out of my mouth cannot be trusted when I'm in an emotionally dysregulated state.
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
Megan has shown me, like she knows that what I said was not what I meant, but in the moment it was so, I was so passionate and so like into it, and but your brain is not thinking rationally. You're
Right.
not in that rational prefrontal cortex part of your brain. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's literally impossible to use that to engage that when you are in a triggered fight or flight state.
right. And so just yeah, whatever we can do to get up to that point, but then be able to back off. That's what I'm working on.
You know, something
Um,
that I've done more recently, or in like since I've been in therapy, is when I notice that that's happened to me, I'll just say it. I'll just tell Scott, like, I know I'm freaking out right now. I know that this is not appropriate. I'm sorry. I love you. I need to go chill out for a minute. Like, I'll just
right,
go, like, just go somewhere else. Like, I'm not trying to, you know, put all my stuff on him. But that
right.
doesn't mean that I'm not feeling all of those things. It's just once you start to catch yourself a little bit, then maybe you can help yourself be like, okay, I'm not going to damage my relationship by acting in ways that I shouldn't or saying things that I don't mean. You just like,
Mm-hmm.
nope, okay, nope, I need to be alone for a minute. Just let me be. I love you, but go away.
Well, and that's important to be able to recognize what you need, and but you also go back and think and talk about those situations after the fact, right? It's not
Yeah.
just something that happens and you blow up and you're like, what and then you and Scott never talk about it.
Right.
That would be detrimental to the relationship, because going into those situations knowing how it might look or seeing some of the signs of dysregulation is incredibly helpful for both people, especially the person that's not, in the throes of that
Yeah,
emotional dysregulation. So communication is so important. Um,
definitely. Yeah, he's really great about, I mean, we've been together for 9 years now, so he knows me pretty well, and he can generally tell if we're starting to get into a situation where maybe, like there's a lot going on, we're in a crowd, a lot of different noise. Like he knows like okay, that I might start to spiral a little bit. So he'll make a point of like just grabbing my hand and squeezing it. He's like, "Hey, you're safe. You're fine." And like that actually does a lot to sort of like bring me back from like, okay, yep, no, that's right. You're here. I'm safe. I'm fine. But yeah, it takes a really understanding partner and someone who is willing to work with you on those things. And you and I are both examples of the fact that that can absolutely happen.
Absolutely. And having those things in place, just like just reaching out for your hand, like re that sky is helping you reconnect to your body
Yeah.
by just grabbing your hand and going, oh, okay, yep, I feel all this, but he's right here. Like that's what Megan and I have had to do as well, just recognizing, hey, you seem like you're getting a little bit wound up. Mine is like starting to do this kind of stuff, like
I like self-soothing kind of stuff.
yeah, just starting to get twitchy or like shaking my knee or whatever, and then she just touches my leg or hand or whatever, and I'm like, yep,
Aw.
I'm take a breath. So
Yeah.
that's part of the learning process. Um, I think we've already talked about the negative self concept. Like
Yeah.
we've sort of covered that. If you want to say anything else, but we were, I think, segueing into disturbances in relationship is the last one that we have listed here,
Yeah.
as we were talking about the people in our lives. So in in this symptom, disturbances in relationship, there's difficulty trusting others, intense or chaotic relationships, isolation or feeling disconnected even in social settings, fear of abandonment, people pleasing or pushing people away, um, attracting or staying in toxic relationships, and boundaries can be excessively rigid, inconsistent, or easily violated. So, a lot of different things that have to do with being in a relationship that can be affected by this trauma stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, and we have touched on some of this, but does anything stand out as far as um, disturbance in relationships?
Yeah, so like something we had touched on before, or like specifically here in this category of disturbances in relationships, you mentioned isolation or feeling disconnected, even in social settings. To me, that goes back to the sort of negative self concept and thinking like, oh, if people knew the truth about me, they wouldn't even want me here. I don't belong here. I'm not, like these people. I'm not one of the good people. And it completely, even if I'm there in the moment and even interacting with people, I'm not really present. And again, that's another reason why like I would turn to things like alcohol. It's because it would quiet a lot of that stuff and I would feel like I'm actually getting to connect with people. But I mean, that's not in a healthy way at all. And yeah, there's a it's just it's really difficult. And then yeah, for me especially staying in or attracting and staying in toxic relationships, I mean really until Scott, I was in relationships that just mirrored what was modeled to me growing up. They were very chaotic, very abusive, fear all the time, but that's what was normal to me. To where like I'm surprised and am thankful every day that I'm with Scott because he's not the kind of person I've ever been attracted to typically. It's like he's just safe and steady and not chaotic and loving and understanding and fully trustworthy and just all of these things that I would have dismissed as like, yeah, no, I don't know what's wrong with you. I'm just not into you. But thankfully, I reached a point in my life where I valued someone like that. And I'm very grateful that he came along.
Right, but it wasn't familiar to you.
Not at all. It felt
That's
so weird.
My therapist was talking about this the other day, that we tend to be attracted to others, and it could be friendships as well, or just non-romantic
Yeah.
relationships, but we tend to gravitate towards what's familiar.
Hmm.
And even though that looks really messed up in a way and kind of is, it's still our nervous system. That's what it's used to, whether it's the chaos or what. And a lot of people, stay in abusive relationships because of that. It can be unsettling to be in what we would consider healthy, safe, like, even though we all
Yeah.
want that type of relationship, it can be really unsettling. I wasn't, I was more the opposite, especially in relationship, like dating relationships earlier on. Um, I just kind of had a rule that if it got too serious, um, it was usually about 3 months, and then I would just bail. Or if there was any sort of disagreement or problem, I'd be like, yeah, okay, that's fine. I'm done. Like, I'm not. I would disconnect or um, move away from relationships because of the stress and all the messiness that came with it, because I didn't know how to be in a relationship. So I pushed it as far as I could, and then, yeah, this isn't working. Yeah, it's not you, it's me, which was totally the truth. But it's kind of
Yeah.
lame. I wouldn't say that, but I would be like, oh yeah, this one's me for sure. Um,
Hmm.
but trusting others, I have real abandonment issues. So any relationship that I did decide was worth effort was so scary. And
Hmm.
Megan and I have been together for 5 years, and it wasn't that long ago where those thoughts were regularly popping into my head about, well, enjoy it while it lasts,
Right.
because this can't last. This is
It's gonna go
too
away.
good. This is really uncomfortable because it seems to be everything I wanted and then some. But I just have this default mistrust,
Hmm.
like it's going to go bad, that catastrophic thinking. And it hasn't. Like, that's like, people can actually work through situations and disagreements and arguments and whatever. You can actually work through stuff like that
Yeah.
and it not end the relationship. And to me, it's like, you either avoid talking about serious stuff or disagreements or whatever and just live this kind of partnership, or you get messy and understand that it's okay as long as you're working on it with with each other. We can do this and it not have to be ending in catastrophe.
Right. Right. And that in itself is so healing for people like us to be like, okay, here it is. This is it. This thing I need to say. It's going to be the end of it. And then for them to just show up for you and be like, yeah, no, I still love you. Like, we're
Right.
fine. Like, we can talk about this. We can work through this. Like, that's just a whole, you know, it really messes with your head, I guess, when you're in the sort of beginning stages of that. But I mean, you could see too how, at least like the way that it would play out for me typically was I would get into these super toxic relationships because to me, that's what love was. That's what love was always modeled to me as. It was inconsistency, unpredictability, fear, threat of abandonment at any moment. That's what I knew. That was my safe zone. It's like, okay, I know how to navigate this. I know how to, ready myself for any sudden pitfall. But when it comes to somebody who's not that way, like for you with Megan and me with Scott, that was the thing that was stressful because it just kind of felt like, okay, wait, there's something I'm not getting. Like something's got to be about to happen. There's no way that this can last. Like, oh no, now I'm starting to want to like trust you and like feel this other kind of love for you, but you're just going to go away. Like that's always what happens. And like it just feeds into itself.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier something about, and it doesn't allow you to be present
Mm-hmm.
because you're constantly like, either I'm upset about the past and looking at experiences and applying that to the present, or I'm future tripping about what is going to happen that won't happen, but I know it's going to, and
Mm-hmm.
you're missing that present moment, and that's where that relationship grows and matures and builds.
Yeah.
So the way that trauma has affected our worldview and our line of thinking always amazes me, in that, wow, this is such an unhealthy, no wonder, like,
Yeah.
right, I think that a lot, no wonder
Yeah. Me too.
things were like this, or things went this way, or because that's how my brain is working. Now I can recognize it and go, yeah, that, I'm pretty sure that's not healthy. And I'll just say, Megan, I don't know. Like, this sounds like this, but I have no idea if this is a health. And then we talk about it. It's
Yeah.
like I don't have to feel like a child. I don't have to feel like an idiot about emotions and feelings anymore, because I just say, I don't know. What's this supposed to feel like? Is this
Yeah.
positive or I do. I feel just like a child sometimes, and I don't mean that in a negative self-talk way.
No.
I just really don't get things sometimes when it comes to emotionally charged situations, because that brain that just takes off and
Mm-hmm.
leaves the rational brain behind is like what I'm used to.
Right.
So, and without a partner or someone in your life that's willing to look at that, to work on that and see that you're worth it and they want to invest, it's like, oh my gosh, okay, first of all, that means there's something wrong with you too. But what was that?
I don't know. The light just flashed on and off behind me.
Ooh, that might be a topic for your other channel.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh,
But like
anyway.
what you were saying about, feeling like a child, I get what you mean because it is true. When you start being able to work on yourself in that way, you are healing your child self, or like correcting things that, or I guess relearning is a better way of putting it, relearning things that you learned as a child, that you learned to be the way to go about the world. You are learning a different way of doing it. So yeah, it's not that you're acting like a child, it's just
Mm,
you're relearning things that you should have learned, decades ago, like in your earliest stages of life, but you weren't given that opportunity to.
right. Yeah, I'm back to the early learning stages, and it's not frustrating anymore. Every once in a while it is, but I used to get really frustrated, like, I should know this.
Right.
I should this, or I could like, it was this negative talk that I developed because I felt ashamed that,
Negative self-concept.
yeah, that, hey, that was one of the things.
Yep.
Um,
It all
but
feeds into itself.
yeah, and then start beating myself up about it. And
Hmm.
I mean, the and this all looks different for everyone, but hopefully people are seeing that you and I, as different as we are, still experience these things in slightly different ways because of how we either grew up or, our place in life. um the last little bit here, that so other common symptoms of CPTSD include depression, anxiety, dissociation. We've talked a bit about that.
Hmm.
um and they all kind of overlap. There's no clear delineation between these things because they're us. Um, Chronic pain, fatigue, migraines, gastrointestinal issues, autoimmune, sleep, self-harm behaviors, imposter syndrome, trouble with authority. Like,
Hmm.
there's so many symptoms, and it's a bit overwhelming at times, but hopefully as we learn more about this, we start to see a clear picture of what we look like and what some of those symptoms are. Because I could sit next to you like throughout a day and like point out things that I think are response like trauma responses.
Right.
That's not going to help. Like that's,
No.
I mean, what's happening inside, trauma happens inside of us, traumatic events happen outside of us, and then we develop trauma within us, and we're all different individuals, but some of these common themes are what are important to recognize, not the little nuances that we're trying to figure out now. Seeing or recognizing that some of this might be pointing to trauma in someone's life.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's about all I have. I was just trying to go over looking at these notes again. Um,
Yeah, we covered a lot. And yeah, there's, like you're saying, like these aren't, hopefully, people can look at these things and see, and hopefully too, with us trying to talk about what this looks like for us, see like, hey, okay, maybe, because a common thing again for people, especially with childhood trauma, is they think, oh, my childhood didn't affect me. Like, I'm fine. And then, but if you're seeing and hearing this stuff, be like, wait a second, like, a lot of this sounds really familiar and I haven't really understood why. It's like, well, yeah, maybe this is or at least part of what's going on with you.
yeah, and it's just so hard to recognize when you grow up as a child in abuse, um, because you don't know what it looks like to develop normally,
Exactly.
healthily. Um, so yeah, I think it's just important to recognize that maybe you are experiencing some of these things, and then you have to look into it on your own. It's
Mm-hmm.
not enough for me to say, "Yep, I got complex PTSD, and my therapist told me that, and I looked at all these, and I've got some." So now it's good to go. Like that means that you now have things that you can work on in
Right.
order to heal so that they don't continue happening, but it takes time.
It
It
does,
takes,
but it's absolutely possible.
yeah. And that would be what we would want to leave people with, is that there's nothing you can't heal from.
Mm-hmm.
Like honestly, there, yeah, am I going to have scars? Am I going to have like regrets, or like, sure, there's things that I can look at and be like, well, if I hadn't have had trauma and this wouldn't have, but I'm choosing not to do that. I'm choosing to look at my life. I go back to what Megan said. You, you don't have trauma and then try to get rid of it.
Right.
You have trauma and then you learn how to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so eye opening for me because I just wanted to get rid of it. Just like I wanted to get rid of substances. If I just don't use substances, I'm fine. No, that's not
Right.
the case. That's bullshit. That's just a tool that I'm using to keep those other things at bay. So just having conversations with people that are like minded and bringing light and awareness to these symptoms or the topic itself, I think is what we really want to get out to the people that are watching this, is that you're not alone. And just because you have some of these things that we talked about doesn't mean that you're broken and fucked up and can't be helped, and
Right.
you're going to drain society. And it just means that you're in the beginning of learning how to be a healthier person and live a better, happier life. It's
Absolutely.
100% possible. We've both had periods of suicidality in our life, and
That
things
was
were
most of
just
my life.
awful. Like
Yeah.
it's not somewhere you want to be. I
Mm-mm.
mean, the down and out, the substance abuse and the sickness, and like it, I think back to how I was trying to cope. I don't feel bad about that. That's what I was doing and it worked for a long time. But
Right.
now it's like, I don't have to feel sick anymore because I'm trying to suppress all these memories and emotions and feelings, I can talk about them
Yeah.
and I can heal through talking, through speaking about trauma. That's a great name for our channel, by the way.
It is.
That's
It
pretty
is.
much all we
Good
do.
job. Yep. You absolutely nailed it. And it
Yeah,
is. It's such a key part of it. And like,
yeah.
Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who I love, he's the
Mm,
world's leading expert on trauma. That's the talking about it is the thing that he noticed was working first. Because he started out doing support groups for Vietnam veterans in the VA who weren't able to get in to see someone yet. He just started doing support groups. And he noticed that just these veterans talking about what they were experiencing in the present and also things that had happened, that they were actually feeling better. I mean, like they needed a lot more help, but yeah, absolutely, absolutely talking about it and hearing that other people experience these things and feel the same way and think the same thoughts. It's that connectedness that a lot of us have been missing for a lot of our lives.
yeah, and one thing, we probably don't want to dive into this too much, but one of the things I believe very strongly keeps the process of healing from starting is the fact that we don't talk about these things because of the shame
Yeah.
involved. We didn't really talk too much about that, but the shame that comes with being a victim of, in my case, sexual and physical abuse, abandonment. That's that's something that when we can actually talk about what happened, there's something freeing about that. But it's easier said than done because I didn't love myself enough to give a shit to talk about this with anyone other than a paid therapist.
Right. Right.
I didn't want to bring light to these issues, but it's counterintuitive because that's what actually starts the healing is recognizing and accepting that these things are part of me and I can talk with others about it just the way that I'm experiencing it. When you say the same thing or a similar thing, I'm like, wow, we're connecting, and I really like you. I think you're a great person and really smart and all these wonderful things, and you have trauma.
Right.
You're
Right.
not a bad person. You're not completely fucked up and an awful person, or else we wouldn't be sitting here doing this. So until we talk about it, we don't recognize it in others, and we don't see that we can connect with others. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's the reason this channel came into existence, so that we can talk about this stuff and people don't have to feel so alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I hope people know too that healing, first of all, healing from trauma, it's not a straight path. And there's no set amount of time that it should take. And I'm not even sitting here today as someone who's just fully healed from my trauma. I am still fully in it. And it may take me my entire life to get through, all of the ways that it's impacted me. But I can say that I'm at a place where, yeah, I'm actually happy, in life, and I'm not having to rely on substances, and I'm getting better at being able to regulate my emotions, and I'm learning better tools and meeting more people like you. And it's just it it sounds really daunting, especially to think like, wait, I got to actually look at this stuff that's happened to me. But that's not even necessarily true. Going to therapy doesn't mean that you're going to have to rehash every single thing that happened to you. Generally,
Right.
a good therapist will be like, okay, whatever happened. What we're working on is how it's affected you. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot easier, in my opinion, to go into, knowing like, okay, I'm not going to have to tell you every single awful thing that's happened to me. Just
Yeah.
you start working on, all right, where are you at right now? Let's start there.
Yep. That's all it takes. But it takes that first step, that recognizing it and knowing that you need some help with this.
Hmm.
But just starting on your own, reading and researching and being more comfortable with looking into it. You don't have to do it with someone else right away. You don't have to talk about it on YouTube or whatever. Like just getting started with, hey, this might be something that is affecting my life and I should look into it, or I can look into it now.
Yeah.
So, but
Yes.
there's hope. There's healing and there's hope for everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, you want to wrap this up?
Sure.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I just so if there, those of you who out there who want to look into this a little more, I think Chad and I both really recommend the Crappy Childhood Fairy on YouTube. She does a lot of videos talking about complex PTSD. I think has been pretty illuminating for both of us. And I also really like the book The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk that really talks about trauma in probably a more in-depth way than what you've heard so far, and it's just so eye-opening. And then also even just doing things like yoga and meditation, that kind of stuff is also very healing, and it helps you better regulate your emotions and your mental state just by doing those things every day.
Mm-hmm. Conscious breathing.
I never
Just
thought breathing exercises would work for me. It blows
really,
me away every time it works. Yeah. I'm like, wait, okay, I'm actually chilling out. This is amazing.
yeah. How simple,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
Yeah. Just
I'll put some links in the description too of some breathing exercises and get guided meditations that have been particularly helpful for me in case any of you guys want to check those out.
yeah. Right on. We at some point we can start a resource page,
Yeah.
or in the uh, description or whatever, because I think we could narrow it down to a few really solid places to go look, or
Hmm.
resources for people that are hoping to get started on this journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's good. Well, I think
All
that's going to
right.
be it.
Yeah, and I on my channel, I always like to say, if you're watching this, I love you. Just the fact that you're watching and you're looking into this or care enough to watch this video, then I think you're at a good place to get started. You're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. And you don't need to feel shitty and shameful about any of this stuff. Okay. That we're both here to tell you, you don't have to feel that way anymore. So get started looking into it, but just know that there are plenty of resources out there that can help you on your journey to becoming healthier and happier.
Absolutely. I could not have said that better myself.
Well, good. Well,
Yeah. No, you got
well,
it.
thank you, Heather. This was, I sounds weird, but this is so fun. Like
It is. It's good to
being
talk
able to
about this
talk
stuff.
about this stuff. Yeah, absolutely. I know some people are out there going, "Fuck,
No,
fun."
if they're still watching, this had to have resonated with them.
Yeah, if you're still watching, you're on our A list, by the way, too. It's a
Yes.
long video. Well, thank you, Heather, for hosting with me, and I'm excited about many more videos to come. So
Yeah,
make
thank
sure
you.
everybody subscribe, click the subscribe button, and the bell will let you know when we put a new video up. So do that as well.
Yes, and share it with anyone who you think needs to hear this kind of stuff.
Yes, please. All right. Well, until
All
next
right.
time. Okay.
All right. I'll see you next time, Chad.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.